Thank you, Shannon, for meeting and I've been kind of watching you on social and just wanted to catch up. It's been about a year, I think, since we did our other Zoom event and maybe even seen each other that one property location, that condo. But since then, I think you've kind of evolved your business, it sounds, into integrating both neuroscience into the design work that you're doing. And I find that like extremely interesting. Because your home is an extension of you and your probably says a lot about your personality, your mental state, your just like all those things, right? And so I want to just kind of hear from you, like what is neuroscience when how do you blend the two and what are you doing nowadays?
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all, and this opportunity to talk about it. It's a topic that I'm super geeking out on these days, so I have lots to say as much as we want to dive into. But I mean, generally speaking, so neuroscience is obviously, the study of how our brain works and functions and different neural pathways that light up in our cognitive processes and things like that. And if you kind of take a step back, every way in which we experience our world and our environment is through our senses. And so there's a key emphasis as an interior designer and designing homes and spaces. There's so much sensory input that we as designers and design professionals have control over. And we as just occupants in our spaces can have control over our sensory environment as well. And so when I talk about neuroscience and design, it's really looking at what kind of sensory experience are we providing for ourselves and how can we design that sensory experience to support us in our daily functions, in our current phase of life, in our cognitive load. I'm super kind of obsessed with cognitive load these days and just, how much is too much and how to kind of regulate that cognitive load because again, if we're taking in so much sensory stimulation, that's going to increase our cognitive load from its more kind of conscious task work. And so if we can use tactics to reduce our inputs at that cognitive level to be able to tap into things that we consciously want to tap into, that's kind of the basis of the integration or my goal with the integration of neuroscience.
Gotcha. And how is that really applied to whenever you're, looking at a home or doing design? Like, can you give just an example of what that may be?
Yeah, I think I look at it from a macro level and then a micro level. So at the macro level, like that would be your whole entire home, or a macro could also be an entire room. But so if you're house hunting or you're looking for a new home or you're looking to remodel a home, like what does that macro environment give to you? What are the shapes? What are the textures? What are the patterns? What's the flow? What's the orientation of walls? There's a baseline that every human experiences certain shapes and patterns the same, and it lights up same similar neural pathways, and that's because we all came from the same place and through evolution and through the way we used to be. There are some things that are the same for everybody in terms of how we perceive shape and pattern and texture and things of that nature. And then at the micro level, that could be, okay, well, what is the furniture arrangement in that room? Or what are the colors? What are the, kind of micro scenes within that macro? And those are more interchangeable. Those are highly personal. That can draw on your past experiences to influence your state of being of where you currently, like where you have been and where you currently are and want to be.
So it's being very intentional about all the spaces in your home, from, like you said, shapes to orientation to maybe just how furniture and decor is set up, right? Whether or not, and I don't know, does nostalgia like play into that at all?
Yeah, so there's familiarity. I would say familiarity in the more, I guess, kind of proper term. But you can say, nostalgia comes from a sense of familiarity. And so that is very comfortable to us. We are very comfortable. We feel safe and secure with things that we're familiar with. And so that's where that kind of macro or micro level really comes in. If you incorporate pieces that make you feel that nostalgia or that have that familiarity to you, you're going to feel more safe, secure, and grounded in that home space. And I will say there's a very high level of self-discovery that I take my clients through and that I encourage people to go through when they are thinking about a new home or they are thinking about a remodel, because it's that personal aspect that's really going to give you that sense of grounding and that ability to tap into a certain state of being that you want to tap into.
The major milestones, or when you're meeting with the client, like what is the thing you want to walk away with from the conversation, needing to know about the client before you actually kind of launch into a project?
Yeah, I mean, I'll ask them about, past homes they remember, past experiences they remember. I even ask, what's your favorite restaurant to go to for the ambiance? What's your favorite restaurant from a taste perspective? When have you felt yourself feeling the most comfortable? Like, was it a hotel? What was that like? Just kind of different, a lot of questions about feeling, and a lot people don't always go to feeling as the first thing. They're like, well, I need 3 bedrooms, or I need this, or I need that. I'm like, yes, but tell me about the way you felt in different spaces, because that will help us identify what is actually needed to make you feel like it's a home place that you're moving into.
So like in the bedroom, right? So like maybe that's more of a restorative place or
Mhm.
like a calming. What I guess approach would you take with a bedroom?
I have a huge I'm developing a whole entire digital course on bedroom design, specifically
That's
around neuroscience and connection of partnerships and just your own self, and just really having the bedroom be that space of the foundation and the connection point. One thing I also ask people a lot is, how much stimulation do you have outside of the house, and how much do you need more or less inside? I would say 99.5% of the responses are a lot of stimulation outside, need less inside. And so that really kind of makes me, come to the notion of like, our homes are supposed to be our sanctuaries, right? But we still have active zones. We have our kitchens, we have our work zones and things like that. And so when you think about the bedroom, what a beautiful, true retreat and sanctuary that could and should be
Mhm.
for that foundation of partnership or self-belonging or any self-discovery or self-growth. Like that's just such a beautiful space that can be designed to enhance your own well-being as well as your partnership.
Yep. Is there a go-to in the bedroom, other than maybe like colors of paints and whatever that you think kind of achieves that overall tranquility or that calmness or.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, there's certain things that everybody responds to similarly. Biophilia is huge, and biophilia is everything, that nature gives us, like the natural world and how we interact with the natural world. A lot of people think that biophilia just means plants and plant life, but it really means like sun patterns and light levels and air changes when you think about wind. And so really incorporating a lot of natural elements in the bedroom will help create that grounding and that calming. I mean, and if you think about it, we've only had like our completely enclosed structures for not a long time in our entire history of humanity. And so we want to connect with that a little bit more. Round shapes are softer and more calming to us than even right angles or triangles.
Mhm.
Um, we just perceive them differently. We perceive subconsciously, we perceive triangles and right angles as a threat because they are sharp and they're harsh. And again, where we came from, that was like claws or thorns or something threatening to us.
Mhm. That makes sense.
And then, so that's kind of, there's definitely tactics that at a baseline level for everybody. And then I would say the self-discovery and the really getting inside of both people that are occupying the space. I'm,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not really
the
a,
most difficult thing, right? Is because you're married.
yeah. And I'm not really a fan, I think there's still, it happens all the time where it's like, oh, whatever she says goes. And I'm like, no, because that's not going to work. You're going to
You'll be remodeled right out of the house.
Exactly, exactly. Well, and it's like subconsciously there's so many cues. And if you're not comfortable at that subconscious level as a man or as whoever is saying like whatever they say goes, you're not going to feel as comfortable and grounded. And that's not the point at all.
Yeah.
So both people are included, anybody who's occupying that space.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the more input, the better the outcome, probably.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So, touching on that, is there any other parts or any other rooms of the house that you find fascinating that, you kind of hone in on with your approach?
Um, I just think the overall flow is really important. I'm really big on zones, and that's active zones versus quiet zones, and then sort of like transitionary spaces between those zones, just to kind of give your mind that, even if it's just a second, right? Or 3 seconds or whatever down a hallway, just to give your mind that transition from one place and state of being to another.
Mhm.
A lot of times you see in just big open floor plans, you're going to get all of that simulation just coming at you constantly when you can't close it off. And that really, really adds to our cognitive load without us knowing. And so if you have a big open,
Really funny you say that because
yeah,
I've always been partial to the zones or the homes that have rooms that are kind of their own spaces. But we've been in this big long fad of open, open kitchen, living, dining, everything is just open. And now that you say that, that is the total feel that you get when you're in one of those homes, or if you have a home like that, because you're overstimulated because you're seeing everything, right?
you find yourself like kind of turning in circles sometimes, or and you're just like, well, what am I supposed to do here? I'm just dumped into a big box, and I see, some functions, but like it doesn't totally resonate because there's just too much.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you do like the openness in terms of high ceiling. I mean, everyone's different, but I personally like the high ceiling look and windows and like that. But that's very much different than having all your rooms kind of a part of one, unless it's intended to be an industrial loft, and that's
Yeah.
like, that's the vibe. But
Yeah. Well, and funny you say high ceilings, because that's bringing up really looking at what kind of person you are and maybe what kind of work you do, or just who you are as a person. Like, high ceilings are really great for creative people because you don't feel like, psychologically, you just don't feel dampened. There's the way you perceive that high ceiling that actually kicks off the neural pathways that make you feel inspired. And so, there's just, that's the parts of self-discovery that I really dig into, is truly who are you and what kinds of structures do you need to make you feel most at home and most optimized in who you are.
mhm, that's awesome. I love that. Go ahead. I think you had a couple points that.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that you and I kind of touched on a little bit, we were just sidebar talking before we really joined here. You were talking about real estate just being really interesting right now, and non-affordability and things like that. And it really kind of triggered me to think about just changing the narrative. I know a number of realtors, I know a number of building professionals. I've been in the industry for a long time, and I think that if we can change the narrative just a little bit and not always just think about the program and think about the program being, I need this many square feet, or I need X amount of bedrooms, or I need, but again, just like really thinking about what your true needs are and who you are and how a home can support that, versus these blanket, this is what I need because I'm leveling up my life, because I'm ready to take that next step, because I'm ready to take that next level. And I just think, like, what if we can think about that next level as our internal well-being instead of a status of a bigger house?
Yep. Yep. Definitely. And I think that adding on to that, yes, as real estate gets more expensive, as interest rates, as costs, utilities, like all the things,
Mm-hmm.
um, create more costs in owning a home, you do really have to sit back and look at, okay, well, do I need to have that 4,500 square feet, or am I good with 3,000, right? Do I need that extra bedroom or two bedrooms? That I'm going to the office. I don't maybe need the home office. It's nice to have. That's probably the one thing that people love right now. But the extra bedroom for maybe visiting family twice a year or something,
Yeah.
right? Need that space. And if you don't, then that helps you kind of get into a different home, or build another home, or rearrange your space in a different way, that you know creates more affordability, and then also you could optimize it and customize it for you.
Yeah. And if you do have, a certain number of rooms, it's like maybe they don't have to be as large, or maybe there's windows to open them up more. Maybe the living room doesn't have to be super big and expand, just really kind of looking at the size of things to shrink that down if you need to from an affordability standpoint, because it's not all necessary to give you what you need to feel at home.
What, this is random, but just kind of came
Yeah.
to, because we kind of, it feels like simplicity, right? Keeping things very clean and um well, just I think it's simplicity comes to mind when you think of a peaceful home, a sanctuary, that type of thing. But there's also something to be said for the home that has, the antiques, the all the artwork, all the things, all the colors, like
Like
all the
maximalist.
yes, right? Exactly. And so what would you say about those folks and that, that's their style and that's what they love? Is there something from a professional standpoint that you pick up on or that you notice about them, trends with those type of homeowners?
I think there's a tipping point. I think there's like this point when there's kind of like three areas that I'm carving it out in my brain right now. There's like the super minimalist, which you might not have enough stimulation, right? You might kind of get bored or feel sterile. And then you have the people who are starting to be like a little bit cluttered and just a little bit disorganized because maybe that's just their habits, maybe they don't have the places to put things. And then you have those maximalists.
Hmm.
And I think it's this clutter zone that becomes like the most problematic.
Yep.
But when you start to incorporate, like if every wall was covered or you had like a wall of bookcases and there were so many tchotchkes, it's like you start to read that as one big scene.
Hmm.
If there's not a lot of space between the things that are on the wall or on the shelf, your eyes will just start to read that as a block. It'll be like if you have, let's say, like I don't know, actually one of our neighbors has like a doll collection that's still in their living room. But you start to just like, because they're all kind of similar shape and scale. And so you just like read this doll collection as they're older. They're, I don't know, in their late 80s. And so it's just like they have cabinets and cabinets of these like porcelain little things. But you start to, it doesn't bother you.
Hmm.
I keep saying the same thing over and over because it's just like a
So,
block that you're reading.
yeah, so in a weird way, to put it in different terms, it's almost like it is a simplistic version of itself because it's like, yeah, like I could
It,
see 100% what you're
it's
saying.
like that brick behind you, right? Like there's a lot going on, but you read
But
it as
yep.
one block, one
Hmm.
blocky element. So I think when you go into that like super maximalist, there's opportunity to
Yeah.
see things as blocky and like, okay, this is the scene where your eye's not going to discern every single element. It's
Hmm.
just going to group things together naturally. But whereas if you have artwork that's like sparsed out and just not arranged and there's like a lot of kind of void white space in between these elements, your
Hmm.
eye's going to be like jumping around because there's this white space in between. So it's
Yeah.
like that middle zone that can actually get you a little bit more like, ah.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense. I'm glad I
yeah.
brought that up because we run into that all the time when you walk into someone's house and, well, and actually colors too. And I find it with a certain demographic of like every room is a crazy color and, all these, tchotchkes, like you said, and artwork and dolls and like all that stuff.
What's happening? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I will say like, if it's totally random, you're gonna notice that. But if it's more kind of cinched together and arranged in a way where it is groupings, like you can find some reprieve to the amount of things
Hmm.
in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Sweet. Are there any color trends or any like trends that you think for this year are going to be huge when incorporating into like what you're doing or kind of to the masses that you're not keen on?
I tend to, so I'm typically not keen on trends anyway, just because of that personalization and that familiarity conversation. You can implement a trend into your space and you'll like it for the first little while, but then it'll go flat because it's nothing of yours, right? It feels good initially and trends catch on probably because there are shapes and patterns that do speak to all of us in that certain way that feels good. But as soon as you forget to overlay yourself into that, it's just going to go flat. So I think as a baseline, a trend could be nice, but you always want to include your own things. I do like the trend of course, of biophilia though, and that is becoming more trendy. I would
Mhm.
say timeless.
Is there something you gravitate towards in that vein?
Is there something I do?
Yeah.
Just the textures and overall palette and just the liveliness of plant life, the liveliness of having an open window and being able to have things like sway or move around in the space with wind, I think is really nice.
Was
That
it you
alive
that had
feeling.
on social, you had posted something about a tile? You have some friends that make tile. Is that
Oh
you?
yeah, I
Yeah.
do.
And
Yeah.
so I remember there was the tile that you were showing, and I don't know, I can't remember, there were plants kind of around, but
Uh,
the different dimension of the tile itself, I just felt that was fascinating if you want to kind of tell everyone about it. But I thought that that was a really cool, I don't know, way of looking at something that has a lot of depth and texture.
Yeah, so she pulls from fractal patterns. Fractals are found everywhere in nature. Our bodies have fractals on the inside of us. I don't know if this is a new term, so let me know if I need to go into that a little more. Um, well, I guess they will. Fractals are the things that, like, if you zoom in on a plant, right, like the veins and just like the different patterns, or a piece of granite, you're going to see that tiny scale pattern.
Mhm.
Those are just fractals in nature that you find. And so she bases her tile collections off of different fractals in nature. An insect wing inspired one of her tile designs. And so it's not a bunch of squares. It's like every piece, there's like, 5 or 6 different pieces that make up this collection that kind of fit all together in the end, but they're also 3D and really like iridescent, kind
Mhm.
of some shiny tiles,
Yeah.
some very biophilic colors. But yeah, the whole premise is sacred geometry and fractal patterns of her entire tile collection.
Is it also like earth tones, or you could have, you could kind of have other tones too, or what do you find?
Yeah, you can have other tones.
Yeah.
You can have other tones. Yeah. Generally speaking, you're asking?
Generally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, other tones.
Yeah.
I'm a very you can see the green sofa. This was the client home behind me, but very colorful
Hmm.
person in design. I think it's really important for a lot of different reasons.
Do you want to talk about any of your projects that you have going on that are kind of fun?
Yeah. I have a number of fun projects going on. I
Yeah.
have with that same okay, so the tile designer is also an architect. So
Okay.
tile is kind of like her second career move, if you will. Um, and her and I are partnering on a project down in Ecuador, and it's actually on a sacred site. And so we're kind of looping in, elements of her knowledge of sacred geometries and a lot of these kind of neuro pathway recognitions, within the site.
Mhm.
Um, they want to build these retreat spaces that they host workshops for people to just kind of decompress and have some self-discovery and self-growth and really connect to the land and, be little earthlings for a little while. So we're designing the building to really like foster that and their intention,
Very
which
cool.
is
And you have the
super
light
exciting.
aspect down there too, right? Being on the equator
Yes.
and
Yeah,
the
it's
sun and all that is just like crazy. I have you been? I'm assuming.
No, I'm going in May. I'm going in 1 month from today, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. It's
So
beautiful.
we'll be down there.
Awesome. Wear
Yeah.
your
What's
sunscreen.
that?
Wear your sunscreen.
So I've heard, yes. Well, thankfully, Arizona, you kind of stock up on sunscreen still.
Used to it for sure, but
Yeah.
it is just slightly different. You could kind of feel it.
Yeah.
But that's very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think generally, there's been a lot of projects that have come in this year, even just this year so far, that are just very aligned and intentional with again, that kind of different narrative of looking how we occupy space. And even residential clients that I have are very, very in tune with their well-being and how they want to feel in the space and how they're connecting with self and the space itself. And, so it's just, if there's anything, I think that there is a trend, in mental well-being, of course, but like how people are really looking at their home life. And that's a trend I'm obviously super on board with.
Yep, for sure. And so when you come in or you're helping a client, do you walk into their current home and then you'll help them kind of rid of things or give them ideas, or do you have, or are you just kind of the design stepping in and then going forward?
Both. I mean, I had a couple people recently, they're like, okay, we know we're gonna keep some stuff. We're not married to anything, like whatever's gonna work. maybe here's an heirloom piece. A lot of people are more open or becoming more open to purging what just doesn't work from an aesthetic and a clutter and just, an overall kind of well-being and flow of the home.
Yep. And
So
I think
yeah,
moving away also from cheap furniture to more sustainable pieces, more, and I know we've changed our mentality on that too. We actually look for a lot of repurposed furniture. We
yeah,
like that kind of
yeah.
that vibe, and timeless and will be with us, for a long time. So I think that there is a kind of a movement of more so that versus being the cheap or buying, cheap furniture, randoms
Well,
online.
yeah, I mean, and there's a sense of permanence that you get from those more heirloom, higher quality pieces. And sure, it's an investment up front, but when it's more substantial and it's grounded, like it really has that grounding resonance in the space, which is really helpful again from that kind of neuro perspective. I think place attachment and sense of permanence are just another layer of things that I look at to make sure that there's a healthy level of that. It doesn't matter if your home is only going to be your home for 2 years or 5 years, or it is your forever home. You always still need and crave as a human that sense of belonging, that sense of permanence, that sense of self. And those larger, more substantial pieces help you feel that.
Mhm. Most definitely. Do you have an opinion on like piano pieces or like any instruments?
I mean, yes, I love insurance. I don't have a strong opinion.
Yeah.
I don't, it's not a hindrance by any means.
Yeah, but like place
Yeah.
room or like, just orientation or things that I guess if you have someone who's more, it depends on the person too, um, and their personality and all that sort of thing. But
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably wouldn't want to put a piano in a space just for the sake of having a piano, but if it's somebody who plays and it's going to get used, like let's put it in a space that makes sense to be
Mhm.
used. And I have a client right now and she's a pianist and we have it like right in the entry and she really uses it and it is a statement piece for them.
Yeah, more of
Uh,
a sense versus something
yeah,
that's hidden in the
yeah.
den or somewhere else. But someone might like that because it's their hobby. And so again, it comes down to the personality probably.
Yeah, and I don't think that we need to like we shouldn't hide those things, right? Like those things don't need to be hidden in a room if that's who you are. And again, going back to that sensory experience, if you are a musical person or even if you're not, just to have those things to kind of tinker around with and play with, because a lot of the self-discovery too is finding new things. And if you talk about neuroplasticity, right? Like you always want to grow that mind into new things. And so the more we have those types of creative arts tucked away, we're not going to use it. So I think if you can incorporate it in a well thought out way that's kind of right there in front and center, that's kind of a nice touch.
Yep. Well, I'll ask you one more random question. This is going to be
Yeah.
about your yard and landscape.
Oh, yes.
Do you do any work in that space?
I can help with general spatial layouts. I'm not a botanist. I wouldn't be able to tell you what plant species necessary. I can do a lot of indoor plants for air quality and things like that, but no, I wouldn't call out plant species.
Mhm.
But I've definitely worked on yard plans where I've helped spatially arrange like where's the best place for barbecue or a seating area or,
Yep.
certain crazy kids' backyards and things like that. But also
Mhm.
not, I stay in my lane. I'm not a full landscape designer. If it's not super intricate, I can help block things out.
I think a lot of what you're doing inside of a home also translate to the outside, right? Like you said, with rooms and or zones and spaces, because especially let's say in Arizona, you might be backed up against, maybe a little mountain or you have some rockery or you have something that's like a part of the land and you want to vibe off of that, or you have people want a little like citrus sanctuary, or maybe you want a
Yeah.
little like, like there's a lot of different things that people can do with their outdoor spaces that also give them the same kind of calming or sanctuary effect as you would have inside your home too.
A ton. And I would say, like if we can think about more gardens and more like sanctuary, like that citrus sanctuary just sounds so magical, and I think the more connection we can bring ourselves to having those spaces and putting more attention to our outdoor spaces
Mm-hmm.
is just so helpful for us overall and our overall well-being, especially our cognitive well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it's super trendy right now to be super clean and super manicured, and that's not always again, that's not always the best for us or for the environment, especially in Arizona, you know, too much grass.
Yeah.
You save our water.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you could see like up here in Washington, that's where I'm at right now. You know, the wildflower gardens, right? Those are just as peaceful. And actually, I could simulate that to the room that has all the tchotchkes and all the stuff, like
Yeah.
have like all these wildflowers everywhere. And it's just basically a, you know, there's something to be said for that. And there's something to be said for a rose garden. And there's something, you know, I love that type of thing too, but I could definitely see how what you do translates to that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can see how that wildflower garden, right? Like there's so much there, but if you look a little bit beyond it and you're not focusing on just the one flower, like it's a whole blanket, right?
Yep.
And it becomes like a whole just one big blocky scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that, yeah, exactly. It's that same concept.
That's going to be my major takeaway from this.
Your biggest takeaway. You're gonna be like, I'm turning into a maximalist now.
This is my excuse too. Thank you.
Green light, go.
And is there anything else you kind of want to talk about your process or the actual services that you do, you know, provide?
Yeah, I provide typical interior services. So that's help with just furniture packages and kind of what I call stylized, which is all the fluffy stuff like not fixed to the house. I also take people through substantial remodels or slight remodels where we're specifying hard finishes for, you know, their remodel project. I do new construction drawing sets and partner with architects on those. And then, of course, with the neuroscience stuff, I have created Home Self Neurodesign. And that's a set of digital courses that I am launching. There's an intro course that's launched. And then speaking of, we were talking about the bedroom earlier, there's a whole entire bedroom module unit that I'm launching with the Home Self Neurodesign. So really connecting that bedroom space and, you know, connected partnerships.
So is that so that other people can get certified in the space or just have knowledge?
Just have knowledge.
Yep, gotcha.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, and always love catching up with you and watching you on social. What is your social handle for Instagram? You want to share with everyone?
Fuse Living.
Yep. Okay.
At Fuse Living, and then at homeself_neurodesign.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
I
hope
to chat with you.
Yeah, you as well. And have a wonderful day.
You too.
Talk to you guys later. Thank you.
Bye.